Welcome, guys, into King Josiah TV, where this channel was created to educate, promote, and influence the kingdom of Jesus Christ in this world. As your host, I am Josiah. Guys, before we get started, guys, you know I always ask, if you're listening on YouTube, go ahead and smash the subscribe button for me. And if you're listening audibly on Apple Podcast or Spotify, go ahead and hit that follow button, guys. All right, let's go ahead and get into it.
Watch giants fall like Goliath. David, I dance. This ain't no tick-tock. God told me that my steps was ordered. Walking in flip-flops. Chris Rock, how they laughed at me.
All right, guys. Next thing we're going to get into is going to be Cliff and Stuart knechtle. They were on Alex O'Connor's podcast. And this actually just recently popped up on my YouTube feed. And I was like, man, they talked on some subjects that was like, I don't think that we are one as Christians challenged on in the first place. And second, I think that there are things that we need to talk on pertaining to things in the Old Testament and how things were kind of constructed and how the God of the Old Testament is versus the God of the New Testament. That Cliff was really challenged here on this, not challenged in a way like I don't think he had a response, because I mean, I love Cliff. I mean, I follow him on Instagram. I watch he goes to the colleges and stuff and does street preaching. And man, this guy knows how to stand on the word of God. He knows how to break it down. And so I just really liked how this guy pushed him because it just really kind of brought some other things out. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it.
I must say that's not the picture I get of God from the Old Testament. I want to talk about gospel reliability, but perhaps we should do this in order.
Good.
Even Christians today will speak as if the God of the Old Testament is like a different character. There's the God of the Old Testament and there's Jesus, and they're kind of the same, but the God of the Old Testament is Yahweh and Jesus is Yahweh, but like they talk about them differently. And I suppose the first question is, can you understand why at least people are doing that? If you read the Old Testament and you see a much more military, jealous, apparently vindictive, one who regrets things, one who seems to physically sort of walk.
And what he's saying is a valid question that a lot of people that are believers or non-believers, they have questions on. So as Christians, you should be ready to have a defense for this. I'm gonna let Mr. Cliff answer it for us. I'm not going to answer the question because of course I have an answer, but I'm gonna let him speak.
Walk amongst sort of the Garden of Eden, but is also sort of really far away, but is also kind of localized in a temple. And then you have this Jesus figure, the meek and mild, the endlessly loving, impossible to picture as anything other than just like love and softness and beautiful. Can you understand why people see these as incompatible?
Sure. But I hope God is jealous. I hope you're jealous.
Sure.
If you have children and they're starting to entertain the friendship of a drug dealer, I hope that you're going to be jealous for your child's attention and loyalty. And when you see a drug dealer begin to weasel his way into their lives and suck them into drug addiction, I hope that you will have a selfless jealousy where you will seek to win your child back. I hope you'll be angry at times with a righteous indignation. I mean, if I beat you up and steal your wallet, the police come in because these guys call the police. Stuart calls the police. And the police say, Cliff, you beat up Alex. You stole his wallet. Now let's go to Starbucks. Well, that's ridiculous. Moral outrage is appropriate. Why? Because injustice is horrendous. Well, the same people who object to that will say, oh, well, God's just loving and forgiving. Oh, no. God in both the Old Testament and the New Testament is angry about evil. Good gracious. Jesus took a whip of cords and drove the religious hypocrites out of the temple. And the bloodiest book in the Bible is not in the Old Testament, it's in the New Testament. The last book of the New Testament, book of Revelation. The blood flows like no other place in the Bible. So the Bible is very consistent. God has a righteous jealousy, a righteous anger, but he's a God of mercy and grace. And yes, he will judge. And Jesus said, I'm going to be the one to judge you.
Because that's a great point. And I'm glad that Cliff brought it up in this way. God hasn't changed. People try to think that the way the God of the Old Testament, God of the New Testament is different. No, God is all holy. He's all righteous. He doesn't pick up love, righteousness, or justice down for another. So I just want to read some verses here and just some further key points and key verses that actually speak further to Cliff's point. And just some of my notes here. A prominent verse illustrated in God's hatred of sin is found in Psalms 5:5, which states, "For you are not a God who takes pleasure in wickedness, nor evil dwells within you." It signifies that God does not delight in sin and actively opposes it. Everywhere in the Bible, from the Old Testament till now, he was actively opposing sin at all takes. He's never changed his stance on that. God said, I am the same today, yesterday, and forevermore. So some key verses here, guys, that just further speak to this point of God not changing and God being the same God of the Old Testament as he is the God of the New Testament is God. We're going to talk about some notes here. God's nature. It emphasizes that God's character is inherently against evil, meaning he cannot tolerate sin. Nowhere does he tolerate it through the entire text. No evil dwells with you. This phrase further emphasizes God's complete separation from wickedness. Other verses that better conclude this is Psalms 11:5, guys. The Lord detests righteousness. The Lord tests the righteous, but the soul hates wicked and the one who loves violence. Proverbs 8:13. The fear of the Lord is hatred of evil. He's always hated evil, guys. Pride, arrogance, and the way of evil, and perverted speech. I hate. Got to think, I hate that. God is the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. So God, in his entirety, has not changed. His stance is he stands and opposes against hatred, sin, and evil. Anytime in the Bible, when God raised his hand down for wrath, was against those things in the Old Testament. Thank you guys again for paying attention to King Josiah TV. If you're listening again, guys, on YouTube, if you haven't yet, why haven't you? Go ahead and smash that like button. Give me a like, guys. Go and hit the subscribe button. If you're listening audibly on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, go ahead and give me that follow button, guys. Again, thank you guys for staying in tune today, and you guys enjoy the rest of your day.
But my salvation on me like it's a helmet. The wages to sin is death, for send you to hell quick. Wanted to be all about me, God, I was selfish. I was